Hello, welcome to a new episode of Germany in Focus, a podcast made possible by members of The Local. Today we're getting into the shocking move by a German Green MP who has ditched the party and moved over to the Conservatives, and what this tells us about German politics right now. We are talking about fresh fears over the future of the €49 monthly transport ticket, the state of rail infrastructure in Germany, and the construction projects to watch out for this year. German citizenship rules have changed, but do applicants now have to declare Israel's right to exist? That is what some foreign media were reporting last week. We are going to explain what the new rules actually say. And is over-tourism a problem in Germany? We're going to get into that and hear from culture expert Mike Stutchbury on the crowded tourist spots you might want to avoid and some alternative places to visit. Lastly, we'll chat about some cool events in Germany this July. I'm Rachel Loxton and I'm in Berlin today with journalists Imogen Goodman and Sarah Magill. Hello.
Hi, Rachel.
How's it going?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, also good. Good to be back with Sarah for the second time.
And it's great to be back in the booth.
Yay! Are you guys still enjoying the Euro 2024 action?
Yeah, very much. I think it's been a great tournament so far and looking forward to the big clash, Germany against Spain on Friday.
Ooh.
That's going to be, I think, the game of the tournament so far. I was just saying it almost feels like the final. These teams have stood out and then they're going to come together. And I can't call it, to be honest. I'm very much hoping for Germany. But I've just got to think of a good place to watch it now where the atmosphere is going to be great in Berlin and where I can actually see the screen. That's going to be the challenge.
Yeah, I think the second part will be difficult. I think atmosphere is going to be good everywhere. I can imagine in Stuttgart where the game is being played, it's going to be amazing. And maybe the German home fans will swing it.
Maybe. Yeah, they got the home advantage.
Yeah, but Spain have been doing very well. So it's going to be a tough one.
It will be.
And also, Sarah, this is the last time that you are in the booth before you go off and get married.
Yes, it is, yes.
Finally happening, the wedding.
Yeah, the next time you see me, I will be a married woman. I'm getting married on the 20th of July, so I'm getting very excited,
in
a little bit nervous.
Italy,
Yes, I'm very excited and also a little bit panicky, but no, I think everything's going to be great. I'll make sure to send you some photos.
Yes, please do. And definitely come back here and tell us about it. Come back to the booth, I mean.
I will, as long as marriage doesn't change me completely.
We hope not. Okay, let's start with some German politics news. So, it might be a bit crazier in neighbouring France at the moment. They're holding an election right now. And in the UK, there is also a general election this week. But in Germany, we are seeing some surprising, if a bit more understated news. This week, it emerged that a Green member of the Bundestag wants to move to the centre-right Christian Democratic Party, the CDU. Imogen, this is something we don't see often, right? What has happened?
No, we definitely don't see it often. Actually, the last time a Greens politician moved over to the CDU was actually way back in 1996. So we're talking 28 years ago, almost 3 decades. So this doesn't happen every week, let's put it that way. And last time around, it was a former East German civil rights activist by the name of Vera Lengsfeld. And this time, it's a 30-year-old parliamentarian called Melis Sekmen who grew up in Mannheim in Baden-Württemberg and whose grandfather was a Turkish guest worker. So to the surprise of almost everyone, Sekmen actually announced her defection to the CDU on Tuesday in a statement and video she published online on her parliamentary website. So in this statement, she thanks those who have helped her, who supported her in becoming an MP for the Green Party. But she said that her views on politics and the style in which politics is done has really evolved over the years, and she now really believes strongly that people should be able to raise difficult topics without being pigeonholed. So she also had some words of praise for the CDU's Grundprogramm. So that's their core party program they recently brought out. And she said it was a set of policies that she could identify with. She also had words of praise for her hometown of Mannheim and the people she said had worked to build their lives there, her family included, of course. As a slight olive branch at the end of this this statement, this bombshell announcement, Seckman said that she still believed really passionately in protecting the environment, that would still be part of her core beliefs, and that she really wanted to remain in dialogue with her former party. But I don't know how likely that'll be. I'm not sure there's much love lost between them at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do we know why she decided to leave the party? Because this is, of course, a centre-left party, the Green Party, moving right across to the centre-right.
Exactly. Yes. Well, she was quite reticent on that point herself. But from the media reports I've been reading, it does seem like Seckman was always a bit of a lone wolf within her party, especially in the days when she was part of the more left-leaning kind of grassroots local party back in Mannheim. So she is, from what I've read, definitely someone who seems to champion these values of hard work and, dare I say it, who possibly has a bit of a pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. And so in Parliament, she wasn't particularly well known, but she mostly focused on economic politics, initiatives for businesses and startups, which would traditionally be more the realm of the CDU and the Free Democrats or FDP. And so this actually all came to a head when the FDP published its very economically liberal 12-point plan back in April, which, among other things, kind of set out these plans to scrap the coalition's welfare reforms and take a harsher stance on benefits claimants. Apparently, Seckman felt quite drawn to these ideas. She quite liked those ideas. And to the annoyance of her party, she even publicly said that she liked them. So that was clearly maybe one of the first public signs of this division. Perhaps maybe the more divisive side of this puzzle has been the debates over identity politics and things like migration, integration that have really flared up in Germany over the past months. So you may well remember that really tragic knife attack at an anti-Islam rally back in May, in which a police officer lost his life and several other people were injured. So that attack took place in Seckman's hometown of Mannheim. And the authorities believe it could have potentially had an Islamist motive, given that it was an anti-Islam campaign. Anti-Islam campaigners were targeted. So after this really horrific incident took place, Seckman called publicly on her party to take a much more critical stance on radical Islam and said that people should be able to bring up these topics without being pigeonholed. Interestingly enough, she actually echoed this statement almost word for word in her defection letter without really mentioning Islam explicitly, saying she wanted a culture of debate where people weren't pigeonholed for their concerns.
Wow, it really seems like a kind of bitter divorce in a way, this
Certainly.
Leaving a party publicly.
Definitely.
What's the reaction been to this?
Well, as you can imagine, the Greens, as I've mentioned, really weren't too happy about it, although they have bitten their tongues a little bit. Many members of the party have said that they were really blindsided and shocked by the move. And one member of the regional party, Cindy Holberg, who's the vice chair of Baden-Württemberg Greens, told Spiegel that the defection was really unfair to voters who had wanted a Greens politician, voted for one, and then ended up with a Conservative politician.
Fair.
It is very fair. I'd be slightly annoyed by that, I think, if I were in their shoes. A statement that was put out by the district branch of the Green Party in Mannheim has kind of taken up this point, and they've even called for Seckman to step down and give the party a chance to field another candidate on that list instead. Of course, on the other side of the political divide, there were a lot of smug faces this week. CDU parliamentary leader Friedrich Merz apparently gave Seckman a very warm welcome at the parliamentary meeting, the first that she joined on Tuesday. And he's since said he thinks there's a great deal of overlap with her politics and also her family story and the values of the CDU. Maybe on a slightly cynical note, I think the Conservatives will be very, very pleased to have a woman with a migration background entering the fold. Just a third of the CDU MPs are currently women, and far, far fewer come from migrant families.
Mm-hmm. Imogen, although this is just one politician moving to the CDU, it tells us something about the state of the German political landscape right now, doesn't it?
For sure, it absolutely does. And I would say in two ways it kind of reflects the political landscape. So perhaps most strikingly, it reflects this sense of crisis in the traffic light coalition right now. So just as a reminder, that's the coalition between the two centre-left parties, Social Democrats and Greens, and their more economically liberal colleagues, the FDP. So arguments in this very uneasy coalition are really nothing new. But recently, this has all blown up into this huge and bitter debate over next year's budget, a debate that's even led to disagreements within the parties themselves. So this really all feels like a culmination of all those resentments that have built up over the years. And this latest defection is really just the perfect symbol of those divisions. Another thing I think this represents is the rather dramatic lurch to the right in German politics. As I've mentioned, Seckmann has had long-standing disagreements with her party, but I think her comments on the attacks in Mannheim are very telling in particular. So recently, we've seen the far-right AfD with their vociferous anti-Islam and anti-migrant platform really growing in prominence in German politics. And interestingly, we've also seen the CDU, so Seckmann's new party, taking up many of these talking points when it comes to Islamism and integration and really trying to make that platform their own. So just to sum up, seeing a former Greens politician arguing that these points should be made more by these centrist parties, these mainstream parties, really does tell you a lot about where German politics is today.
Absolutely. And we have talked about the budget problems of the coalition government a lot, and most recently a few episodes ago. But this is really a massive headache, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is, to put it mildly. And even though we've seen these endless arguments, seemingly unresolvable issues in the past, like when are they not fighting? There are some really strong signs that this one could even be fatal. So we've said before that July 4th is the deadline to look out for in terms of signing this new budget into law. By the time this podcast comes out, that deadline will have come and gone, and we'll be hurtling towards the new deadline, which they've now set for themselves, which is July 17th. So that's the new date to look out for. Let's see how well they do with that.
Thank you so much for those updates, Imogen. Speaking of those budget troubles, another possible victim is the €49 ticket. This is the monthly local public transport pass that Germany introduced just over a year ago to great fanfare. Sarah, I feel like this ticket seems to always be in danger somehow. German politicians are always threatening to get rid of it or increase the price. What is the latest on it?
Yes, well, the bargain monthly ticket is back in the headlines this week because Germany's finance minister, Christian Lindner, raised doubts about the future of the ticket in an interview with the Welt am Sonntag newspaper last weekend. He said that at some point, politicians will have to decide if they want to invest in the train network or if the price of the Deutschland ticket should stay at €49, suggesting that a price increase will be necessary to improve Germany's rail infrastructure. But the good news for now is that there's no danger of the price increasing this year, as a price freeze was agreed upon in January and is in place until the end of 2024.
Okay, so it stays the same price this year. Is it really expected that the cost will go up in future then?
Well, that's definitely what's being argued. Last week, the head of the Conference of Transport Ministers, North Rhine-Westphalia's State Minister Oliver Krischer, warned of massive price increases and the possible end of the Deutschland ticket due to funding disputes. In a letter to the finance and to the federal transport ministers, Krischer said that if prices aren't increased significantly, we could soon see a confusing patchwork of areas where the Deutschland ticket is available and others where it is not due to local financial constraints. But the argument that a price increase is necessary to fund improvements to the rail network is contentious, according to a report by the newspaper Taz. Increasing the price of the Deutschland ticket would only cover a tiny fraction of the cost of updating the whole rail infrastructure network, which is a €1 billion project, multi-billion euro project. Detlef Neuss, chair of the passenger association ProBahn, told broadcaster WDR politicians shouldn't exaggerate with the price increase and that the ticket should not become more expensive than €59 a month. But what is, of course, at the bottom of all of these arguments is the fact that Deutsche Bahn's train network desperately needs updating, and there are major renovation projects planned for 1,800 train stations and 40 routes throughout the network over the next few years.
As you mentioned, Sarah, it does seem to be one of the biggest issues when thinking about Germany's train system, the balance between offering cheaper transport tickets and trying to get more people onto the trains, and then also to get more investment into the infrastructure. And this week, there were also some reports on falling punctuality rates on long-distance trains in Germany. Can you tell us more about these problems?
Yes, well, Deutsche Bahn has apparently achieved one of its worst ever punctuality rates in June, with almost half of long-distance trains reportedly arriving late to their destination. The German newspaper Bild claimed that only 52.5% of long-distance trains arrived on time last month, month. Though Deutsche Bahn has blamed many of these delays on extreme weather conditions, saying that on average, over 400 long-distance trains per day were affected by factors such as landslides, flooding and dam damage. And the passenger association ProBahn has also noted that the increased passenger volume during Euro 2024, which started in June and runs until mid-July, is also contributing to delays. But punctuality on Deutsche Bahn long-distance trains has been gradually dropping over the last decade or so. Punctuality has been recorded on these trains since 2012 and was initially quite around a constant figure of 75%. But by 2023, only 65% of long-distance trains were on time in Germany.
Yeah, and we have a survey up on the local site at the moment where we are asking readers to share their experiences on travelling on long-distance trains in Germany. So please head to the local.de and fill in that. I'll also include it in the show notes. We would love to hear if it really is all that bad and your experience of long-distance train travel in Germany. So we do also have to be fair to Deutsche Bahn. They are trying to do a lot of work to improve the network, but that also causes more delays in the short term, right?
Yes, exactly. Deutsche Bahn is upgrading Germany's very extensive railway network. By 2030, they're planning to invest 16.4 billion in a massive infrastructure programme, which includes renewing about 2,000 kilometres of track, along with upgrading several stations and bridges. But yes, in the short term, these improvements are causing more delays. For example, starting July 15th, the Riedbahn line, which connects Frankfurt and Mannheim, will undergo general refurbishment and will be closed until December 14th. And this Frankfurt-Mannheim corridor is one of the busiest in Germany, so its closure is expected to have a ripple effect on the entire network, which will likely put more passengers and trains on alternative routes and affect many cross-country services. Other routes facing disruptions and diversions in the next couple of months include the Cologne-Frankfurt am Main line, which will be disrupted from July 16th to August 16th, Erfurt-Eisenach from August 2nd to November 24th, Hamburg-Schwerin from August 4th to November 22nd, and the Karlsruhe-Freiburg line from August 10th to 30th. So although these upgrades are necessary and will be beneficial in the long run, they are definitely causing some short-term inconveniences for travellers.
Thank you so much for those updates, Sarah. Rules on getting German citizenship have just changed, but one story that appeared in some foreign news outlets last week was that people who are becoming German now have to declare Israel's right to exist. So, for example, CNN, which is based in the United States, ran a story last week with the headline, "Germany demands new citizens accept the state of Israel's right to exist." Another story from the Financial Times earlier in the week had the title, "New German citizens must acknowledge Israel's right to exist." But these headlines are misleading. So let's try and clarify this complicated topic. Imogen, do people naturalising in Germany explicitly have to affirm Israel's right to exist?
No, is the short answer. As you say, this confusion all stems back to these headlines in those media reports. And actually, it's quite shocking that those got past the sub-editors in the first place, in my opinion. Not sure what they were thinking. Maybe there was some bad fact-checking there. Who knows? So yes, we've reported a lot on the German government's very staunch support of Israel. But what these newspapers were actually mostly referring to is some new questions that have been added to the citizenship test. This is, of course, the test that most people have to take when they apply for German citizenship. So in light of the recent debates about anti-Semitism and Israel's ongoing war in Gaza, the Interior Ministry recently decided to add 12 new questions to the citizenship test that all relate to things like the founding of Israel, the history of the Jewish community in Germany, and the kind of acts that would be considered anti-Semitic or prohibited under law. So one of these questions does ask, for example, what act related to the state of Israel would be banned in Germany? And the right answer is openly calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. So that's really a sort of tacit recognition that Israel has a right to exist by not calling for the destruction of Israel. Of course, the big difference here is that you could absolutely get that question wrong and still be entitled to German citizenship. You only actually need 17 out of 33 right answers to pass the test. And notoriously, it's very easy to pass. Also, saying this is what the German law states is not at all the same as saying this is what I believe. So that's, of course, another big difference.
Right. And we did approach the Interior Ministry to ask them about this, to get some extra clarification. What did they say?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So the Interior Ministry did point out that the naturalisation law does explicitly exclude people with anti-Semitic, racist or dehumanising views from becoming German, and that all applicants should adhere to the values of a free and fair society. So those values set out in the Constitution or Basic Law. They also told us that if an applicant is found to have questioned Israel's right to exist, the citizenship authorities would be able to investigate whether such statements are based on an anti-Semitic attitude or motive. And presumably, if so, that applicant would be barred from naturalisation. So journalist James Jackson, who has been a guest on this podcast before, has suggested that it could even relate to social media posts that applicants make, for instance, if they explicitly call for the destruction of Israel, for example. The truth is that we just don't know yet. It seems like an incredible use of time for authorities to trawl through applicants' social media posts, especially when, as we've reported, they're already up to their eyeballs in paperwork and backlogs. So really, we'll just have to wait and see how those rules are applied.
Mm-hmm. So Germany has tightened up the citizenship legislation around anti-Semitism and hate crimes. This is also what we've previously reported. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, well, ultimately, the main thing to understand is that the rules about anti-Semitism, racism were pretty much written into the law already. Those have mostly remained the same. But what has changed is that the authorities will be given much more power to investigate applicants, and particularly if they're an applicant with a conviction, for instance, to see whether they potentially have an anti-Semitic or racist motive behind whichever act or statement or conviction they have. So this will basically involve much more information sharing between state prosecutors and the naturalisation authorities to really try and weed out those people with racist or dehumanising views.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot for clarifying that, Imogen. But the idea of signing some kind of formal declaration saying the State of Israel had a right to exist was talked about in Germany, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, it absolutely was. And this goes right back to the weeks following the Hamas attacks of October 7th last year, when the debate over anti-Semitism in Germany had really reached this fever pitch. So in the aftermath of those attacks, when Israel started its military campaign in Gaza, many people in Germany, particularly within the Muslim community, but others as well, took to the streets to call for a ceasefire and show their support for Palestine. Now, at some of these protests, there were reports of anti-Semitic slogans, and there was also, around this time, a spate of attacks on Jewish places of worship, for instance. So that was a really sort of worrying time. Around this time last year, CDU leader Friedrich Merz called for would-be citizens to have to sign this declaration acknowledging Israel's right to exist as part of the process of naturalisation. Of course, this never got taken up by the government, but as we've mentioned, the law was pretty clear already on this issue of anti-Semitism, and it's now been tightened up even further to make sure those people don't get through the process.
Thank you very much for that. Germany may not have the same issues with over-tourism that other countries such as Spain, France and Austria have been fighting against, but there are still some overcrowded spots. Sarah, do you think over-tourism is a problem in any parts of Germany?
Well, with the Euros currently taking place, we are seeing an unusually high number of tourists visiting parts of Germany that they might not typically go to. But generally, though, I think over-tourism isn't a widespread issue across Germany. However, there are certain areas, like the small islands in the Baltic Sea, that can experience problems with high numbers of tourists. Take Sylt, for example. It's a famously popular holiday destination, known as a bit of a playground for the rich and famous. Recently, Sylt has also been in the headlines because of a viral video showing wealthy young Germans singing a racist song to a Gigi D'Agostino song, which caused quite a stir and may have also put off foreign tourists from visiting the island this summer. Funnily, when the €9 ticket was introduced 2 years ago, I remember we reported that residents on Sylt were worried that the island would be overrun by armies of punks travelling there cheaply for the first time, but those fears never really materialised, but they just highlighted the local anxieties about over-tourism. In general, Germany doesn't face the same over-tourism challenges as some other European countries. In fact, Germans make up a good chunk of Europe's tourist population. For example, I recently read that Italy is expecting around 6.5 million German visitors this summer, which is more than from any other country.
Do you get the impression, Sarah, that Germany actually wants to see more tourists?
Yes, I think there is generally a desire to see more tourists coming to Germany. In fact, the managing director of the German Tourism Association said recently that he hoped the Euros held in Germany this year would be a good opportunity for Germany to showcase itself as an open and hospitable travel destination, and encouraged tourists to return and explore other regions or even spend longer holidays in Germany.
I'll tell you who is returning to Germany. All the Scottish fans.
Yeah.
They had
Great.
the best time in Stuttgart, Cologne, and Munich. They will be back for sure.
And the Germans will be waiting to welcome them back. I think they missed them already.
Absolutely. Let's now hear from historian, culture specialist, and the local writer Mike Stutchbury, who is based in Stuttgart. I asked Mike to share some spots in Germany that draw in a lot of tourists and to give his alternative, less crowded picks.
Well, I think you can't see a German tourism advert without seeing Neuschwanstein in Bavaria. Look, it's beautiful. It has a great story with Mad King Ludwig and the mystery of his death. You know, it can't be denied. It's a beautiful place. And obviously, it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience to go and visit it. But honestly, I think that if you want to see something that's just as good and possibly has a far longer and more interesting history, I'm going to recommend Burg Hohenzollern in Baden-Württemberg. It's about, I want to say it's about an hour south of where I am in Stuttgart. And that is the ancestral home of the last German emperors, the Hohenzollern family. Like Neuschwanstein, it was rebuilt due to the fact that the original medieval castle was falling apart. But it is a gorgeous place to go and visit. And one thing that I think it has over Neuschwanstein is that the castle is often venue to festivals and various events that they just can't conduct inside Neuschwanstein because, let's face it, Neuschwanstein was not really well built and they're constantly having to close parts of it to repair it. So, I mean, if you keep an eye out, you can see that there's like medieval fairs or opera or all sorts of things at Burg Hohenzollern, and it's very accessible from Stuttgart, and you're not going to be fighting hordes of tourists to get there.
Also in your region, so you want to pull some tourists away from Bavaria, right? What is another popular tourist spot in Germany and your pick that's not as busy?
Okay, now this is going to inspire controversy and possibly hate mail, so I'm very sorry about this. But if it's down to a competition between Köln or Cologne and Dusseldorf, I'm going to go and advise people to go to Dusseldorf. Now, Cologne has the Dome. The Dome is gorgeous, and it is a masterpiece of Gothic art. Personally, I find the rest of the city, while it has some fantastic museums, galleries, and nightlife, it is somewhat lacking in soul outside of Carnival. Now, that is definitely going to get me put in some lists. Dusseldorf, I find, has more of everything. I think it's got a better prettier Altstadt, let's be real. I think it's more cohesive. It looks better. The beer is nicer than Kolsch. I'm really getting myself into trouble here. But I also think it's got a better cultural scene in terms of art galleries, museums, and other things. And it's somewhat cheaper than Cologne too. So I'm going to advise you that if you have one day in that little corridor, that you head to Dusseldorf. You'll be surprised at how lovely it is and how much there is to do.
Interesting. You're definitely tapping into a huge rivalry in Germany there. So as you say, a little controversial, but I like that you have a strong opinion on this. The good thing is that they're only about 20 to 30 minutes apart, aren't they?
Yeah, if it turns out you don't like Dusseldorf, just get on a train. You'll be in Cologne in 40 minutes. So you're fine.
Great. Mike, can you share one final spot in Germany that might tend to draw a bit of overcrowding that you would recommend as an alternative?
Okay, so the other place that you're going to see if you look at German tourism adverts, along with Neuschwanstein, is Rottenburg ob der Tauber in Bavaria, and it's a famously well-preserved medieval Renaissance city. I think they filmed Chitty Chitty Bang Bang back there in the 60s or something like that. But it's a mecca for tourists from all over the world, particularly American tourists. It's really big because they sell Christmas decorations all year round. Look, it's wonderful. I'm not going to say don't go there. But Nordlingen, which is not too far away, I feel is a much, much more interesting city. It's just as well preserved. And the really interesting thing about Nordlingen is that it's got all of its walls intact, and it's a very round city with one gigantic church in the middle. It's quite a sight from a distance. So if you go there, you're going to be thinking that you've never quite seen a city that looks quite like this. And it's got just as many preserved buildings and things to do and things to see, lots of walking tours. I was surprised at how ready the city was for tourists without having hordes of tourists there. And, you might have people it has a very weird claim to fame. There's a very famous anime out there called Attack on Titan, which a surprising number of people watch. And whenever I'm talking to people about Nordlingen, they say, "Oh, that's the city that the city in the show is based on." So, okay, that's maybe the one group of tourists that you will find in Nordlingen is the anime fans. But other than that, you're going to have the city to yourself. It's gorgeous, and it's a great city to go and take pictures and spend a weekend without having to sort of, navigate which car park are you going to go to, which restaurant is going to not be crowded. Nordlingen all the way.
Another great recommendation. Mike, is that in Bavaria as well or somewhere else?
It is. It's just across the border in Bavaria. So 30 minutes, I think, from the border by train from Baden-Württemberg.
We're into a new month, so let's talk about what's going on around the country in July. Imogen, have you spotted an event you're interested in?
I certainly have. It's actually an incredible lineup of events this month. So anyone who says they're feeling bored at the start of summer has absolutely no excuse to be bored, and they need to get out and about because there's so much going on. And I've picked a really special one this month. So as a lover of all things medieval, as a bit of a nerd, in other words, I'm especially looking forward to the Kaltenberg Knights Tournament, or Ritterturnier, which takes place at this beautiful, romantic Kaltenberg Castle, which is in hilly Upper Bavaria. So this event actually stretches across 3 weekends this month, starting July 12th, and visitors can see some incredible medieval pomp and pageantry, including some incredible jousting tournaments in this wonderfully atmospheric setting. So there are also going to be juggling performances each weekend, and the castle grounds themselves will have a whole menagerie of oldie-worldy entertainment. There'll be craft stalls, music, obviously a few pints of strong medieval ale on offer too. So you can enjoy a stroll around, you can enjoy some food and drink, and you've got 3 weekends to get down there and see the show. So no excuse for missing this.
Sounds brilliant. Sarah, what are you looking forward to?
Well, actually, that sounds amazing. Now I'd love to go there. But actually, another event that I would really like to go to, but I won't manage sadly this year, is the Rhine in Flammen Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Because, it perfectly combines 2 things I like very much, which is fireworks and being by the water. This event is a series of fireworks displays over the Rhine River, and it's happening in July this year on the stretch of river between Bingen and Rudesheim, which is not too far from Frankfurt.
That sounds great. Is it over a number of days or is it a specific day?
Yeah, that's just happening on the 6th of July this year.
Great. Okay, brilliant. Well, one thing I think you should definitely look out for this summer is the LGBT demos and celebrations. Germany's largest gay pride celebrations are called CSD, Christopher Street Day, named after the Stonewall uprising that happened in New York back in 1969. So every summer, German cities and towns host CSD events. They are big, they are colourful, they are loud. They're really amazing to see, and it's great if you can go along, show your support for equality and inclusion. Aaron Burnett, who is often on this podcast, talked a lot about the CSD in an episode we did last summer. His favourite CSD event is Berlin, he told us.
What a surprise. That doesn't sound like Aaron at all.
Yeah, he loves that one. This year, the Berlin CSD takes place on July 27th, but the whole of July is actually Pride Month in Berlin, so there are plenty of events. Cologne's CSD is the week before, on July 21st, and there are also a few taking place in August, including Frankfurt and Hamburg. And of course, other smaller cities also host Pride marches. There are also a lot of smaller queer events that go on, so you should definitely ask around your local area for tips on how to support them. I also saw there's a Disability Pride event in Berlin that takes place this year on July 13th to support disability rights. So yeah, go and show your support. Get out on the streets this summer.
Yes. Yeah, I'll be there.
Brilliant. That's it for this week. Thank you very much to all our listeners. As always, we will add the links in the show notes for the stories we've been talking about today. Please leave a review or a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tell us your feedback. We always want to hear it. This week's panelists have been Imogen Goodman and Sarah Magill, and our guest was Mike Stutchbury, and our sound engineer is Rhys Edwards. I'm Rachel Loxton. We hope you enjoyed listening, and we'll see you again next week. Until then, take care.